back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As you all know, I'm Steph. I'm here today with my boy from the Discord. Everybody hit that Discord. That is where all the degens and the sharps, we are theory crafting, coming up with crazy new ideas for dynasty values, startups. We are figuring out a ton. Drid has been pounding the table for his guys, coming up with takes in that Discord, and we go way back. He was leaving comments on some of our earliest videos, picking apart our takes, and you know what? We enjoyed the conversation so much with this guy. We've kept him around. We've had to keep him in check sometimes as well. He can get a little flagrant. Hopefully nothing too crazy happens today. Derek, Drid, what's up, man?
Hey, you're going to have to keep me in check on this one. I'm ready to go. Let's get into it.
I'm super pumped about the 2024 class right now. I've spent the last, I'd say, 4 weeks in the lab. And there's a lot I want to dive into before we showcase these rankings, because where we're at in the season, obviously there's things that can change. Now, I think a lot of things that are not going to change are going to be some of the player evaluations, the physical archetypes, the things that we can look at. For example, receivers. We have target share data on them now. We're starting to get YAC data, drop data. All these things are coming out, and so you can start to move guys around, especially as you have a full sample size of a 2023 season that we can add in for these prospects. We're getting declares day by day. My boy Xavier Worthy declared today. Let's go. Early declare for him. And that leads me right into, Derek, the 2024 rankings. There's guys that I'm high on. And as you know, Xavier Worthy is one of those. But if you've come here today to hear the consensus, same echo chamber takes that you've always heard, that's not what you're going to get today on the show. This is for the degens. These are the sharps. These are the people that are playing DFS in week 18, grinding underdog in the offseason, dynasty startups all offseason. That's what you're here for. And so the rankings that I have for you right now are not baking in draft capital, right? There's quarterbacks that you're going to see in these rankings, and I have these rankings posted, constantly updated in the Discord channel. So join that link in the description down below. Guys like Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, to me, are very draft capital dependent. If these guys fall to the second round, I'm going to be looking at them more like Will Levis, maybe even like a Hendon Hooker type guy in this upcoming class, versus if they go top 10. If JJ McCarthy goes top 10, now I'm very interested. Now, in these rankings, I've also included, let me just share my screen here for a second. Again, I don't want to bore you all with slides or spreadsheets here today, but I do have some things I want to share. If you want to see this again, constantly updated, hit the Discord, got them there. But I've started to slowly build this out. I'm working with some other dynasty degenerates in the Discord to build out some modeling, some ways to look at different stats, help us get in early on some of the data that people are going to be uncovering in, sometimes May, well after the draft, that they don't even look into some of this stuff. So we're already there giving you the hot takes. Now, Derek, I really want to just spend the rest of our time today having you, I don't want to say pick apart, but dissecting these rankings. Now, on here, I have a couple things, right? Physical archetype, I can unpack what that is. I call it physical / play style. To me, that is when I watch that player on tape, who do I see? Who do they look like? Who do they remind me of? So a lot of times I'm looking at their size. I'm looking at the way that they move around, what their highlights look like. Like, is it contested catches in the end zone? Are they taking screens to the house? Like, what does that package look of? What can they do at their ceiling on a football field? And it's like, okay, who do I see? So a lot of these comps, I'm not going to say that, for example, Caleb Williams, Brett Favre. It's just when I watch Caleb Williams tape, I see like a Brett Favre type play style. Malik Neighbors to DJ Moore is pretty chalk. Cortland Sutton to Rome Odunze is chalk. Certainly, I think there's some biases that can creep in from other comps that I've heard, but when you see those players, it's pretty clear and obvious, and I think there is a reason that those are some of the chalk comps that they are. But Drid, clear the air here, bring up a couple of things. I want to unpack this, and there's a lot of nuance, which I think is why it's going to require a long conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at the top of the board, I mean, Marvin Harrison, I don't think people understand how generational this guy is. I think when you really look at him and his abilities, there's nothing this man can't do.
Well, when it comes to Marv, I really think it comes down to this: how early would you take him in a single quarterback startup right now?
Yeah, I would say high. I mean, if there's ever been like a surefire Hall of Famer at wide receiver, this is it. He's 6'3", there at 215. There's nothing he can't do. Short game, long game, contested catches, like he can do it all. I have no reservations about this guy, and he's going to be a locked in. He's going to have the name value forever. Like, just take him. When I get further down the board, like Caleb Williams, he's interesting. I think Brett Favre's a great comp. And even some of the stuff that Mahomes was doing like earlier in his career, as far as like running around and just buying time and then trusting his arm talent to find the open guy. Like if you think about wide receivers, every move, a corner is doing a reactionary move. So every move you add up over time is creating more and more distance away, the corner away from the receiver. So if Mahomes or Brett Favre or Caleb Williams can buy time, the more guys get open downfield, and he's just trusting his arm talent. And I think that's going to get him in trouble a little bit at the NFL level, but he's going to gunsling it, and he's going to be great for fantasy.
Could you imagine if we got him in a Shanahan system? If we got Caleb somehow, it won't happen, obviously, but God forbid one of these up and coming Shanahan coffee buyers, these interns, gets promoted somehow, like a Mike McDaniels type guy, like for one of these teams that these guys get. Like, I don't know, Caleb Williams in a Shanahan offense would be terrifying. That would be like what people wanted Trey Lance to be, except this guy's a million times more proven.
Yeah, and right now the momentum seems to be with Justin Fields sticking around in Chicago. And if that happens, will they auction off 101? And if so, to who? Because then it's not just the people sitting at 2. I know you can look at Tankathon and whoever's sitting at 2 or 3 or 4 right now, but now you're opening up to whoever's at 5, 6, 7. The Giants. Does Atlanta want to come up from 8? Would Chicago even come back that far? I mean, could you imagine Caleb Williams in Atlanta? It's a little soon. I don't like to get into hype. I don't like to get into hypotheticals this early and that far, but you never know what Chicago could decide to do at 1. Someone else on this list, Egbuka.
Let me drive for a minute. Let me drive for a minute real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me talk through really, because I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the chalk guys. I want to get into some points where I'm against consensus. So let me do this. So got Neighbors at 3. He's not a 1B to Marv. Marv's the clear 1. Malik's the 2, and then after that, I think you have a tier of guys. Take your pick of Egbuka, Worthy, Ramadunze. But I think you got to have Jaden Daniels and Drake May. I mean, they're both going to get top 10 capital. I know there might be some gross landing spots in there. Just trust the process on these guys. I love Jaden Daniels for the dual threat ability. I don't think he's like an elite guy. I still think coming out of school, like Justin Fields, for example, was a much better prospect than Jaden Daniels, which is why I had Fields 102 right behind Trevor in that draft class. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I think I had Lance maybe above him at different points. So I don't want to just stake my claim on that, but it was those two guys right there behind Trevor. I don't see quite that with Jaden Daniels, but he's another guy that's just mobile, can create plays off script, did a lot of good things with his arm this year. And then May just looks like that guy who has the size, the cannon, the poise, the proven track record, the efficiency, the touchdown to interception ratio. Great. Now, Egbuka already, like, this is the one that I think this one's starting to get polarizing, I'll say. He's still going to be in most top 10s on any Dynasty rankings. For me to have him at 106, some people would say is pretty spicy. I know you've been up and down on Egbuka a little bit, Drid, but let me speak my piece on this, because I think with Egbuka, you just look at that sophomore year and look at it is helmet scouting. And we joke about like helmet scouting is kind of cringe, but there is a truth to it, because these college recruiters typically look for the same type of guys to fit into their offenses. But regardless, Egbuka is coming from that pedigree of the Garrett Wilson, of the Chris Olave, of the Marvin Harrison. 26% target share as a sophomore, true sophomore, next to Marvin Harrison is actually insane. And then you look at this year, 19.3% target share as a junior, but at the same token, it's like he was hurt most of the year. Marv was having, just absolutely going nuclear, 31% target share, really hard to have a piece of the pie. We should have seen Egbuka do, that same thing again, but he had the ankle. And that's what you're looking at here, essentially an injury discount. If we had seen Egbuka go toe-to-toe with Marvin Harrison this year, somehow, some way, this would be a completely different conversation. So Egbuka, to me, is more, I will say this, he's more of the JSN than he is the Garrett Wilson Olave. He's not quite at that level. If we had seen the junior year smash year, we could say that, but we cannot say that right now because both of those guys had better profiles, even with Olave coming back as a senior, where he started to lose target share to JSN and Garrett Wilson. So Egbuka, though, is cut from that same cloth. I put Adam Thielen as kind of his archetype because I don't see him as a stretch burner. He is explosive, but he's not a stretch burner profile, I would say. He's definitely more of that JSN cloth. So, Drid, where are you on Egbuka? Do you think I'm too spicy with my love of Egbuka being from that type of mold?
It just depends on your risk tolerance with Egbuka. I mean, one thing I kept saying this whole process is basically every player is a range of outcomes, and with Egbuka, you're looking at a floor of JSN, and you're looking with a ceiling of like a Jamar Chase without the deep threat. And like you said, with him not really having that vertical downfield threat, if you took that away from Jamar Chase, they're very similar. I think the testing for Egbuka is going to be really important to where on that spectrum. Where is he? Is he JSN? Is he closer to Jamar? And Jamar is a high praise, but again, if you took away that deep threat ability from Jamar, is he really super special, or is he just a Jarvis Landry high volume type guy?
No, he's more than that. He's more than that.
And with these with Ohio State receivers, I mean, they're well coached. Brian Hartline is the coach there, and he's done a great job. He understands how to coach these guys to teach them leverage and how to use their speed and abilities.
And I don't care so much about the coach, but I will say this because I like where you're going with that. That is kind of the helmet scouting that I was essentially saying.
No, yeah, they're all extremely nuanced. They're very smart.
Shame on me for shaming you of using coaches as a take, because it is true in this particular case. But even if not, if you look at these rankings as we have to draft tomorrow, right? We have to make our 2024 picks tomorrow. Egbuka is going to be safe, and all reports that you hear is that he's going to go first round, if not early second in the draft. Now, Xavier Worthy is where the spice really begins. I'm high on Worthy. I am high on Worthy, and I'll come out and say that. Yeah. I'm fine to have him over Odunze. Xavier Worthy to me is just go ahead.
And just one more thing on the risk tolerance aspect of Egbuka. With someone like Adonai Mitchell, I know you have at 14, but if you're looking for a home run, like a true guy that is going to be first, second, third round startup guy, I think there's bigger hits potential down further your list. Maybe it's Troy Franklin, maybe it's Brian Thomas, maybe it's even Keon Coleman, as much as some of the red flags we have with him. But if you just want someone safe, like, hey, this is a for sure flex play forever, but has that ceiling of what we hope JSN would be, Jarvis Landry, some of those guys that know how they're smart, that know how to exploit a defense, and they're always going to have a role no matter what because they do understand leverages. So if you just want that for sure fire hit, yeah, I would have him 6, but that's where risk tolerance is going to be super important to everyone's rankings throughout this whole process.
100%. And he could have that Stephon Diggs in him. Egbuka might. He might have a little bit he is explosive, and he did a ton as a freshman. Over 500 yards on special teams as a true freshman at Ohio State.
That's a great comp. I mean, and even Diggs is in a great situation now, but even when he was in Minnesota, he was kind of hit or miss. I don't know that he was the deep threat that he is in Buffalo, but if you look at Minnesota Diggs, he's like 1,000, 1,100 yards. Him and Thielen go to toe every year, like just back to back in rankings. Like, I really like that Stephon Diggs comp. That's a good one.
Awesome. So let me talk about Worthy for a bit, because this is the one that, if there's any other Drids that are out there, even in the Discord, I mean, you all push back on me all the time with Worthy. So let me get my takes off on Worthy. So here's what I love about his profile: is it's extremely clean. And here's why I don't ding him from going down from 30% as a freshman, is because the level of competition got better with Adonai and Jatavian Sanders, and he also had Bijan Robinson. But what you had with Worthy was, before the arrival of Quinn Ewers, he was the entire offense. There was nothing else. So you had him in a situation where it literally couldn't get better. And what do you know? 30% target share. He freaking delivers as a freshman, super explosive. And then since then, he's just maintained. Like, what do you want this guy to have? A 35% target share? Like, then we're talking about, like, literally generational, oh my God, prospect. Like, this is the best we've ever seen. Because that would be silly numbers, especially at a big program like Texas that's bringing in 5 and 4-star recruits. So 30% as a freshman, that's insane. 28% as a sophomore, 26% as a true junior, gets the early declare. I think at this point we've seen enough slim receivers, especially over the last couple of years. And that's where you can get in trouble with making these massive historical comps, is I think looking at the most recent 5 years, maybe even 10 years at absolute most. I don't think it behooves anyone to go back to freaking 2000 to understand profiles. You can look at the last 5 years and get a pretty clear picture of the type of guys that break out. In my opinion, I'm open to other ideas on that, but that's what I believe right now at this very moment. So you add the fact that Xavier Worthy, he got the early declare, obviously. To me, that means he's going to go second round at the latest. To me, that's what I would believe at a high profile enough program like that. Also led the country in punt return yards as a junior. What's crazy as well, when people talk about his drops, shout out to anyone that's doubted me on Worthy on the drops. Something looked whack with that. He got that drop rate. I have not bought PFF yet, but when I do, I'll tell you the drop rate on Worthy this year. But what I can tell you is that it's much better from everything that I've read on Twitter and everything like that. But regardless, Xavier Worthy, his second year, that sophomore year with a 26.5% target share, his numbers did drop because he had a broken hand, literally had a broken hand, and then was deployed as a deep threat. So he went from 13 average depth of target as a freshman with that 30%. He played the possession receiver role as a freshman. And then as a junior, they say, hey, we're just going to cork it way more in this offense. We got Quinn Ewers now. We're just going to let it fly. And he didn't have an Adonai next to him. So you're talking about now they're asking him to play a deep threat in double coverage constantly with a broken hand, and he still put up 26.5% or 28% target share, 28% target share next to Jatavian Sanders. And then this year has the Adonai to take a little bit of the ceiling off of him as well. But this guy to me is that Devontae Smith, that Jordan Addison, even a little bit of that like Garrett Wilson, just that skinny, explosive. He gets open, he gets used all over the field, target magnet. Even look at like a Tank Dell, Josh Downs in this class. I think Josh Downs is the absolute floor for Xavier Worthy, with a ceiling being what you're seeing out of Devonta Smith, which is a low-end wide receiver one, year in, year out. He can be a little bit boom bust. He can probably be the number 2 on a team. And that's the thing about Worthy that I think you could say against me having him so high, is that he does profile as more of like a potentially a number 2, right? A Hollywood Brown type of guy. You can make those comps, and I won't debate you too hard on them at this point in the process, but Worthy is that guy that deserves to be like already right now in that discussion with the Hollywood Browns of the world, the Tank Dells of the world. I'm seeing Tank Dell at keep trade cut as wide receiver 14, and you're telling me Xavier Worthy with a Garrett Wilson-esque season, even if he's in a horrible situation, raising eyebrows enough to say, oh my God, this is the next Jordan Addison, Devonta Smith, yada, yada, yada. So that's my take on Worthy. There's a lot to unpack within that. There's comparisons that we can make against the other guys, but what are your initial thoughts on my overall take on Worthy?
I think that Hollywood Brown's a really good comp for Worthy, and I was looking at Hollywood's target share numbers, and even though Hollywood's 5'8", Worthy is, I think, 6'1". I think their BMI is
Mm-hmm.
really close. Hollywood did have that same 30% target share out of the Big 12 also. And like Hollywood, Worthy is a deep threat, but they also show an ability to play at all three levels. I know that Hollywood, I don't think he plays as much in the short and intermediate as much as Worthy seems to at times. But
Mm-hmm.
my concern with him is the weight and the size, and I know we have a lot of examples lately, but like you said, when you look over a long trend, I know you were saying to not look at the long trend. Is the small receiver a fad in the NFL? And if you look at the small receivers, aside from Devonta Smith, how many of them have had long-term success in the NFL? I mean, you could say Tank Dell, but it's too soon to say. You could say Addison, but that's too soon. Downs is too soon. I would say Dotson's a bust. Mooney came and went. I'm trying to think of some others. I've tried to compile a list, but really, unless he's getting like top 15 draft capital, I'm worried that he'll be relegated to like a role player. Unless he's in a really good situation like Dell, like Mooney early in his career, then he can be a guy that you're just asking him to get open immediately. And he does have that ability, and he's a great security blanket for a quarterback that, like, let's say you're the Texans with Dell, you have so many other holes. It's like, well, let's just go fill those holes, and then we'll just get a wide receiver that gets open, like right off the line, immediately gets open. But eventually, a team's going to want more. They're going to want somebody who's not a liability in run game. They're going to want a guy that they don't have to sub in and out. I mean, even look at Dell; he got hurt in the run game, and you just wonder. You wonder if he's just a role player or if he is going to be a flash in the pan. That's my concern with him. But if he does get that top tier draft capital like Devonta, then I'm much more interested. But right now, I do have concerns with the drops. I know he did have the broken hand, but I still want to see that stat and I want to see it come down, because where he was with the drops with the broken hand is in territory that is, there's not a single hit in that range. You're looking at
Deontay Johnson's your best bet.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson. I mean, the other guys with drops in that range were like QJ. Bateman was the other one that I would give an asterisk to due to the injuries that he sustained. Slayton's always had drops. Trying to think of the other ones I had on that list, but
yeah, Tank Dell's had some, and even guys like Tank Dell this year, Zay Flowers, haven't had some of the best catch rates. Maybe Worthy has a little bit of that, which is fine.
Even Rager. I think one of the other problems with Xavier with Worthy, as far as the drops, that outside of like his broken hand, is he just has such long, skinny arms, and when you're trying to catch outside your body, it's like any contact to those arms in the catch process, like it's not good, and that could be part of it. But the other guy, now that I'm thinking, was Jalen Rager, who also had a ridiculously high drop rate. So I mean, that's my concern with Worthy, is just I would want him to go to a situation that is nice and conducive to him having success early. But if he goes to like the Josh Downs situation in Indianapolis, even though Josh Downs had success, I would be more concerned about that, because there are other target monsters in that offense.
Yeah, I think we've done a good job talking about some of his range of outcomes. This is definitely going to be a profile that I'm going to chase, because I want to see a guy that can. If you're telling me like a 27%, like, can he get close to that 25%, 23%? You start to get a little bit like, then he's kind of like more flex territory if he's lower at like at that 21 to 23. But if he can get to 25%,
right,
and to see a guy do a 30% in college as a freshman with being like one of the only guys in that offense, I'm just like, this guy can carry an offense.
Yeah,
he was doing it in Power
and
Five.
I think like the 3-level flexibility with him, and kind of the role player or that target monster is, our team's going to draft him as a deep threat, even though he can play all 3 levels, or they are they going to try to run the offense through him like Tank Dell is doing? So we'll have to see. I'm curious,
Let me
but
ask you this: where would you put Devonta Smith right now?
in this ranking,
No, in
uh,
like dynasty rankings, where do you have him? I'm gonna
I don't
pull
have a
up keep
list.
trade cut.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
you
gonna
pull
pull
up
up keep
Keegan.
trade cut. But what would you guess?
I would say he's probably probably a third round startup guy to say safely.
Okay, wide receiver 13
Uh,
on keep trade cut. So, and then you have
that sounds
Jordan
about
Addison
right.
right above him. Now, keep trade cut is cringeworthy. So I'm not
That's
gonna put a
hot.
ton of
That's
stock in
hot.
this, but the community has these win now scrubs, and that's all they know how to do. One trick ponies have the Jordan Addison up at wide receiver 12, right behind Ayuk and Waddle. Puka Nakua is
Do you,
wide receiver 8.
yeesh. Do you want to play
uh,
some? Do you want to play some either or?
sure.
So you just give me a receiver, and I'll tell you whether to take him or Devonta.
Olave,
Olave.
Waddle.
Oof, that's probably even. That's probably really close. But
Interesting.
I have other concerns with Waddle. Just
JSN,
Devonta.
DJ Moore,
Devonta.
who is 26.7. Yeah, and then after that, it's like DK, Pittman, T. Higgins, Debo,
Yeah, I take
Rashi.
I take Devonta over all those guys. I mean, I'm probably higher on Devonta more than some other guys. I think
Well,
with
Devonta's
him,
just a clean profile. Like
no,
at the end of the
he's super
day,
clean.
he has that element, and Josh Downs had this too, which is one of the reasons I was in on Downs. Was he just had a super clean profile where it's like, okay, like, and I don't think his profile comes anywhere near Worthy. I think Worthy absolutely takes a massive dump on Josh Downs' profile. Let me just say that, make that extremely clear. But they're guys that you see that are early declares, target earners from a young age that just maintained, had competition, but still do really well.
The thing with Devonta that is really interesting to me is even though I have the size concerns with Worthy and just the size concerns being a fad and a trend in the NFL and being like long term success, with Devonta, all of his size issues, he alleviated the problems. It's like, okay, has he ever been hurt in college? No. Does he win impress man in the SEC? Yes. Like every side, and then the other thing you were talking about the other day with the snap percentage. Like he's the second or third highest snap percentage wide receiver in the NFL, and the like upper 90%. So it's just like everything you could ever have a red flag with him due to his size. He's checked the box, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
have concerns with Devonta like I do probably some others.
Yeah, and I look at the rookie year with Smitty, 103 targets. This is rookie year for Devonta Smith. 103 targets. Keep in mind, Jordan Addison just hit 100 targets as well. 916 yards, 5 touchdowns, 14, almost 1,500 air yards. So he's getting saved by some of the deep shots. He's the main guy in the offense. It was Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert that year, and I think you had whoever it
Oh, but
was before AJ Brown.
that would have been Hurts's
That was
first year, which he was kind of starting out, and
yeah. Devonta Smith was 6th in ADOT as a rookie. I think that's exactly what we're looking at with Worthy. He had, let me see here. I want to see something else. Target share 22.1%. So like Devonta Smith as a rookie, finishing as the wide receiver 24 in fantasy. I think that's very much in range of outcomes for Xavier Worthy. I feel very comfortable saying that he's like the next closest thing that we've seen to a Devonta Smith for a guy this small. And he has more of that height. But let's talk about some other guys here. We could probably spend an hour. I love Worthy, as you can obviously tell.
just one more thing on Worthy.
Go ahead.
Does the draft capital concern you? And then, like, if he went fourth round, and that's probably a little exaggerative. I think he
Yeah,
goes
right
like
now
back in.
he's 42nd on mock draft database.
Yeah, so I would probably locked into that
early
second round. So if that's true, and he's not a first round guy, he's not a top 12 guy like Devonta, and even the guys going around Devonta, Micah Parsons, Rashawn Slater, Patrick Surtain, like these guys are superstars. Does that worry you any with Worthy, or are you willing to buy into the trend?
Yeah, I want an edge. I don't want to chase draft capital because that's what most people will do. And they're going to be wrong, and they're going to – now, a lot of times people use draft capital to confirm what they want to think. I've been victim of – everybody's victim of it. And we've all had misses off of guys that were first-round picks that were like, oh, he's a first-round pick. I liked him coming out, and now there's no way he busts. But how many times do we see second-rounders bust? It happens all the time. So – I would obviously feel better if he went first round, but to me, this is the guy that we could be looking at in that low end wide receiver 1 range a year from now because he had a 900-yard rookie season because he was deployed all over the field. And Dynasty gamers are going to love him. And if you don't agree with me, then you can sell high because I'll be the dumb trying to buy him after a good rookie year. Okay, now can we talk Rome Odunze?
Yes, please.
Let's talk Rome Odunze, and then I'll give you some of the most recent changes I've had. And if we want to continue the discussion, we can jump on here later, or we can continue it in the Discord. Again, hit that Discord link to see these rankings updated and just see, honestly, just good conversation about the rankings. I love hearing other points of view on these guys. Drid will be the first one to tell you that I have many times taken what he's told me and into account, done my own research, looked at it from different angles, and said, you know what, you're right. And I'll give you major credit for putting me onto Rashee Rice, who's having a phenomenal year right now. The only reason I have shares of Rashee are because of you bringing up his name prior to the draft, saying, look at this kid, freak of nature combine. He did some really interesting things. And then when it's like, yeah, this guy can actually do stuff on the Chiefs if they can just get the ball in his hands. So credit to you on that. But Rome Odunze, I feel like you love Odunze, but you've been up and down on him as well. Give me your Rome Odunze thought process at the moment.
Man, he's a really hard eval because on some of the highlight tapes, he only plays that vertical X, but it's because they've got McMillan and Polk playing the other roles. So he doesn't play all 3 levels because they have other guys that are better at playing those levels. And is that a demerit on Odunze, or is that just the role he's in at the moment and he has the ability to play all 3 levels? I don't know. He does seem to have some flexibility, some fluidity to his game that makes me think he can play all 3 levels. I don't like making excuses. I don't like making hypotheticals for guys because either you show it to me or you don't. And if you don't, then I have to assume you can't. But I am willing to buy into the thought that it's possible. And like Courtland Sutton, Courtland's this big 6'3" guy, touchdown machine with fluidity. Odunze seems to have a little more fluidity to me. I mean, it does worry me, some of the stat points that you've brought up, to where he does have kind of these late breakouts. And I worry about that, but it seems like it's night and day as he's progressed, which, I mean, you like to see. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm all over the place. I'd like to see him win bigger. I mean, he has a lot of really nice contested catches. But, again, it's like if you're making all these contested catches, it's probably because you're never open. And, honestly, when was the last time the Pac-12 had, really good corners? It's like I don't think they're just stacked at defensive talent at corner. So you kind of worry about that. You'd like to see him get way more open. I mean, you watch Neighbors, and he is getting way open all times, all levels in the SEC. So if you're going to play at a lower level of competition, I want to see you get more open the way he is. So, but I do think that he has that level of being like a first-round startup wide receiver in his range of outcomes, and that's why I'm more willing to buy him than an Egbuka or a Worthy. I don't know that he hits that ceiling, but at least that ceiling is in the range of outcomes. Because, yeah, you're right. You could just be buying Courtland Sutton. And do you want to buy Courtland Sutton at what it's going to cost
108.
you 104. Well, 108 on your rankings. I mean, I personally
Yeah,
have him a 105.
Wow.
So
yeah, and I think that's pretty actually in line with consensus. This to me is about profiles, and one thing I can't say confidently with Odunze, like, is that he is that target earner. You look at all the guys above him, like they have the high 20s, the low 30s target share season. That big, like, oh my goodness, like they can just feature this guy as a weapon. A team will literally rely on them. Now Odunze, you can make some caveats, which is why I still have him at 108. I still think that is. I mean, we're talking about essentially a mid first, and to me, there's a drop off after Odunze. You could even put Bowers right behind him if you want to. If your team really needs tight end, I'm more open to taking Bowers if you just need tight end on like a contender roster and you have that late first because you won the league and you had Hawkinson. Spoiler alert for DMS people, I'm giving away my secrets right now, but with Odunze, I do. I'll say this, right? These are the caveats. I want to circle back to this. So his freshman year was the COVID year. There was only like 4 games, whatever the Pac-12 played. Didn't really do anything. So I can almost forgive that late declare. I just wish he had in that junior year. Could this number, this 19.5% target share, could that have been more like a 22, a 24? Could he have the 25 this year? So now he's still 21 years old. So from a dynasty value, like, hey, he is a young prospect. And Drake London was the same way. Granted, he had the early declare, but like Odunze is still really young. So that's why I'm still very open to him. But it does concern me when you have a guy like, think about the guys in fantasy. Think about fantasy football. You're setting your lineup on a Sunday morning, putting those T. Higgins, those Mike Evans, those George Pickens, those Mike Williams into your lineup. To me, he profiles as more of that. He profiles as the guy that terrifies you because he could give you 3 points. And when he has the big 2 touchdown game, 10 catches, you get really excited. I don't see him as that target earner level guy. Like I'll use Drake London as like another name kind of like that because I think that's probably your best case outcome. Now, obviously, London has been shafted, but if you look at his target share numbers and his air yard numbers and everything else, like what he's doing in the Falcons offense and compare that to Odunze, I think that's what you're saying is best case scenario with him. And they're both kind of these bigger X receivers that really play X mostly. I do think Odunze has a little bit more versatility than a London in some aspects, but London's really damn good at the stuff that you tell him to do on the outside. So, what do you think about that Drake London comp?
There's definitely some commonalities with Drake London. They both have amazing body control at the catch point. You think about like acrobatics in the air, something like Garrett Wilson possessed a lot, even though Garrett Wilson's honestly a kind of a smaller receiver, even though you don't think of him that way.
Yeah, just like
they
Xavier
both do have that. They both have that acrobatics and stuff. I think Odunze is a little bit more fluid of an athlete in that way, whereas London is more of a true X. But when it comes to the target share numbers, what's interesting to me is that Polk and McMillan are both NFL talents. And, even if they're 4th, 5th, 6th round guys, they're still NFL talents commanding some type of target share. And
18%
it makes, to
as
me,
a junior for McMillan.
Yeah. And so that, I mean, even if you don't like those guys, I mean, I know we've had this conversation about some of the SMU guys with Rashee Rice, is that he always had some guy there, even though if they were horrible, it was like he always had some guy above him taking away those target share numbers. So 25.6 to me as a 21-year-old senior, like I'm into that with the level of competition that he's had at the other wide receiver spots.
Yep. And that's why he's here at the 108. And I put these 3 receivers in a tier. And I think that's one thing that thankfully that we can agree on today and bring some cohesiveness to this podcast is that these 3 guys are in a tier. Maybe some people would probably have Worthy behind like a Bowers. I would debate that heavily, but you've heard my case on Worthy, so if I haven't convinced you, that's on you when he breaks out. So let me talk about a couple things let me talk about a couple of things that I want to unpack from this, and then we're gonna hop off. So, some of the biggest changes I've made recently have been Troy Franklin. He's risen on my board a good bit. Obviously, he's the next one we have here to talk about. I won't go into a full take on him. I've done that a little bit, but what you see with him is that 26% target share. He is, if you want to talk about undersized, this guy scares me more than Worthy because we very rarely see this super skinny 6'4" guy. So at least that's what he's. If you look at his height and weight, I'm pretty sure he's like 6'3". I'm actually gonna look it up real quick.
I think he's
6'3",
187, I believe, is
187,
what he's
6'3".
listed at.
That's scary slim. Like you do not see that BMI very much at all.
Well, and the other thing is, I think Troy Franklin wears number 11, so it's like he needs to switch to 88s or something. It just makes him look super thin.
Yeah, could be, and that's why I do have Devontae Parker here. Even though Devontae Parker did have much, he probably had 20 pounds on him or so. But I do see that Parker, that physical comp, and a guy that does play mostly X, a guy that is very solid with the ball in his hands. You wouldn't say he's like the best contested catch guy you've ever seen, but he can go up and get the ball. He's really good at high pointing. He's really good. Just give him a bubble screen and let him get 15 yards on a chunk play type guy. Like he has juice. I think other names that you could say for Troy Franklin would be he has a little bit of that DJ Chark in him. I think if you think about a guy who can high point the ball, you're talking about like an AJ Green high end, but like he's definitely cut from that cloth when I look at Troy Franklin, which gets me really excited in the current dynasty landscape. Just a guy with that level of upside gets me so excited that hey, I'll blow a first round pick on him. Even if I need Bowers, I'll take Bowers ahead of him. But if I don't need tight end, if I'm sitting pretty there, I'm happy to smash the button on Troy Franklin right now.
Yeah, I mean the comp I keep coming back to is Robbie Anderson, and
That's scary, but I
yeah,
like
and
it to some degree.
but I'm a sucker for a good throwback comp, and so I'm going to give you a good throwback comp that I think is going to warm your heart a little bit, which is Martavis Bryant.
Oh no, I don't like that at all.
Really, that dude was a touchdown machine.
That was my comp for Christian Watson, and so far so good on that one. But I think he can earn targets a little bit more. Now, maybe he's all they had at Oregon, right? But the 20.6% target share as a sophomore, I think shows that he can be a little bit more, which is why I do have Parker there, where he can be like the clear number one on a team and do well. So I think he has that in his range of outcomes, which would put him, I mean, shoot. Right now we don't know landing spots, right? So I have to look at this with just if a draft happened today, who would I go with? I think Franklin is safe in that regard. A couple other guys I've moved around my board. Devontae Walker, I've brought him down. I've brought him down just because of how little he's played. I love everything that I see from him on the field. You see, I do have the Mari Cooper comp for him because I do think he does have that little element of he can get shut down by alpha corners. And then they rely on the short game with him, where you can get shut down in the mid or deep levels of the field by big corners. But what he did show is really, really good. But you take into account he's played less than a full season against Power 5 competition. Like, yes, I love what he did at a small school, but we've also seen the Sky Moores. We've seen the Dwayne Eskridges. We've seen even like the Christian Watsons. These small school, super raw guys have a lot of risk to their profiles. But at the same time, they do have that level of upside that if they do learn the game, they do figure it out. At least with Walker, like he didn't go directly from Kent State, right? Like he actually gave us that Power 5 season because he could have declared last year, I would imagine, right? 28% target share in the MAC. But he is an older prospect, and that's another thing that brought him down for me. I was looking at him more on that like Franklin range at one point, but the more I've dug into his profile, the more I've just had to bring him down. Might even see like there's things about Adonai Mitchell that I really like as well that aren't concerns with Walker, but that upside with Walker just is so tantalizing.
Yeah, with Walker, I think everything I watch, I'm really high, but I think he's going to go probably like back into second or early third round. He doesn't have a very complex route tree. I think he's a really smooth runner, kind of like Terry McLaurin, but he just runs these deep route tree concepts, similar to maybe like Josh Gordon in Seattle, to where this dude's going to give you three catches for 70 yards and maybe you get a touchdown every third game. But I don't think that his lack of a route tree is necessarily because of some deficiency he has, as much as they just, hey, they got a big arm quarterback and a dude that runs 23 miles an hour. Like, he's
why would you not do that,
he's
right?
big. Let's let it rip. So, I don't think he's got a very complex route tree like somebody. I mean, I know you have Amari Cooper listed there. I don't think he's that. I think he's a deeper guy, closer to McLaurin. McLaurin's the best case scenario, but he's a guy I'm rooting for. He's a my guy. If we get into the middle of the second round of these rookie drafts or the back end of 2, I think that's where I would be interested in him. It just depending on who's on the board. But I'm rooting for the guy. I'm rooting for the guy. We'll see if he hits or not.
Last couple of things that I'm gonna drop. I keep saying I'm just gonna hit on these guys and then we just give full takes on these players. But you know what? So be it. We're getting these takes in. Last couple of things, guys. I'm excited to watch throughout the process, though. Obviously, any running backs, I'm just praying testing every year deletes a couple running backs that we thought were safe, and if that happens even once in this class, it's going to be terrifying for any of your rosters that need running back, because we're talking about late declare Trey Benson. We're talking about Braylon Allen, which looks more like you have here a Najee Ramondre. I'm not talking about a Gibbs, a Breece Hall, a McCaffrey, even necessarily like an Aaron Jones type guy. We're talking a slightly different profile. But I'm really excited to see Brian Thomas throughout the process. I think he's a guy that could rise significantly because he does have a clean profile from the standpoint of he had that 10% as a freshman, which was nice. That's not something you see often from a freshman at LSU playing against Kayshon Boutte and Neighbors and all these other studs at LSU. I think it's interesting that he got on the field so early, which is why I'm really excited about him. I think he could rise throughout the process. If he tests insanely well, he'll be really interesting. I still think as a fantasy profile perspective, he does profile as a very boom bust type player, which is why I do have Kenny Golladay as the physical archetype listed for him. Again, guys, these are not one-to-one comps that I'm making. I'm just more saying when I watch this guy play, this is the player I see if I had to just visually compare. So Kenny Golladay is why I have him here, but I do think he has that boom bust nature, which is why right now I'm probably lower than consensus on him, because he will be a guy who's landing spot and draft capital dependent. And then you have a lot of that with the quarterbacks. JJ McCarthy could fly up this list if he goes top 10, God forbid top 5. Same thing with Michael Penix if he goes in the top 15. Say to maybe a Vegas where he can just get the ball into Adam's hands, get him into a situation like that. I'd be really excited for Michael Penix. And then any of the running backs, obviously draft capital is going to be huge for them. Bo Nix is going to be huge for him. Any last second thoughts before we get out of here, Derek?
The last guy I want to touch on is J.J. McCarthy. Now, I know I was high on Bryce Young. I was low on C.J. Stroud. So my quarterback takes are a little, suspect at the moment. But I'm just going to say this about J.J. McCarthy. The vibes, I know we're not a vibes podcast here, but the vibes on J.J. McCarthy remind me so much of Deshaun Watson coming out of Clemson, because Deshaun Watson was this guy who was inaccurate relative to the ADOT. So he didn't have a big cannon. I mean, I know he's got a serviceable arm, but you don't talk about him with the Mahomes and the Josh Allens and the Staffords of the world. So he's got an okay arm, and he's inaccurate. And I say inaccurate, 60, 63%, somewhere in there, if I'm remembering correctly. But the guy, everything everybody said was that his teammates love him, and he just wins. And J.J. McCarthy right now just tied Jameis Winston for 5th all time as the winningest college quarterback of all time. I want to say it's 38-1 at this point. So all the dude does is win. His teammates love him. He does not turn the ball over. it would not shock me if he is the quarterback 4 out of this class, and you start getting down in the teens and the 20s and some of these landing spots, they look good. I mean, just start with Denver, you get back to somewhere like Minnesota. Hey, sky's the limit. I mean, this guy, we get the rookie drafts. If he gets a good landing spot, he gets that draft capital, this could be a guy to watch. And I'm not even saying like I necessarily like him or anything, but we could see the value on JJ McCarthy rise quick.
100%. And I love that you threw that out there because there are a ton of good landing spots, and even guys that are like going through bridge, like for example, Seattle. Like if Seattle just wants to mix things up, which I mean, a lot of people think that they do. They say, hey, we're going to get rid of Drew Lock. Thank you. Goodbye. Gino, you're on your way out. This is your last year. You're going to be our bridge guy setting up for the JJ McCarthy era when we take him at 15 or Denver at 14, right? There's a lot of these teams in the mid range that need a reset. So I love where you're going with that. Even like I don't know, would Pittsburgh want to run it back again? Like taking a risk on a Pickett type guy. I mean, obviously, I think JJ McCarthy's a lot better. Here's the problem to me with McCarthy is that he didn't throw a lot. Granted, his weapons were great, right? You had Blake Corum doing amazing things on the ground. You had actually a whole stable of running backs that were pretty solid that they could deploy. Your best receiver was Roman Wilson, who, spoiler alert, he's not in my top 48 players on rookie rankings right now, Roman Wilson. But it's still, I would imagine if you're this elite thrower of the football and you're this dominant playmaker, like you'd be throwing a lot more. You'd be making plays off script. I will say this, in the playoff game and the bowl game, he did do a lot of really awesome things when they asked him to do a lot. They actually asked him to crank up the volume a bit, and I think he handled it well. So I'm with you on the vibes with this guy. He almost could be a little bit like Burrow-esque if he jumps up throughout the process, which I think he will.
The one comp I've kind of heard a little bit is like a Jimmy G if he stays healthy. You know, he's just going to win you some games. Teammates love him.
Interesting.
But we'll see. I mean, he is hidden behind a great run game, right? Like if you're Alabama, you're stopping the run game. You're not stopping JJ McCarthy. Like JJ McCarthy is a second thought.
And that's actually why I have that. Part of the reason why I have Case Keenum as the archetype. One, I just think the size, and like when I watch him play, I see that, especially as a Browns fan watching Keenum for like almost a whole season before. And loved him that 1 year in Minnesota with the Minnesota Miracle. Like that was just awesome. Like that was cool. I think that's in range of outcomes for JJ McCarthy, where he can be this like get him in a good situation. He can have a little bit of magic, make some deep shots, do some things off script, but like that's not going to be his modus operandi, his go-to option. Versus like you look at even like a Drake May, it's like he has so many more tools that he could tap into than a JJ McCarthy, and he's done it with volume, and he's done it with not as dominant weapons on the ground to help him. For sure. I think that's the scariness.
He's going to have the game manager label, but if you get with one of these McVay guys, if you get with a guy in Minnesota, and they've got these playmakers, they're in this offense, the Shanahan offense, like you talk about. Even though he's got this game manager connotation, the role of the game manager is distribute to the playmakers, and he does that. And he does it without turning the ball over. So what else are you asking for? I know that, like, he's not going to create things when you have absolutely nothing going for you like Mahomes or Josh Allen can, but the term game manager does not deserve the negative connotation that's associated with it. I'm just going to say that. And I think
Here's
he
the
gets
bomb
one of these good offenses.
I'm going to drop a bomb, and we're going to wrap up. Again, join the Discord to continue the conversation with us. But what you're saying to me is the comp for JJ McCarthy is
Brock Purdy.
Brock Purdy.
Let's go.